Indra Nooyi is a leader who's at the helm of a $150 billion company, leading Pepsi.
Visionary, competitive, tough-minded, caring.
Who led PepsiCo through transformative growth driven by her performance with
that
purpose, philosophy.
culture quite often beats strategy every time. From the day you arrived, you created your own breaks. You created your own vision.
Your performance with a purpose around nourishing people, replenishing the environment, and cherishing your own people.
You know, for those of you who don't know PepsiCo, we are the second largest food and beverage company in the world, about $64 billion in revenue. You know, one of the long-lasting food and beverage companies in the industry.
My name is Panache, and I am so happy to be here with you for this episode of C-Suite Lounge. Indra Nooyi is one of the most influential leaders of our time, encapsulating the 7 C's into her leadership as the CEO of PepsiCo for over 12 years led to a successful term that has left her being admired by many. Indra's leading with a purpose leadership style championed a new generation of leaders who are socially conscious and care about their customers.
But I'll give you some statistics, okay? The population of the country may be 50-50, male, female. It's actually 50.1 male and 49.9 female. But let's say it's 50-50. Let's round it up and down. Here are the statistics. 70% of high school valedictorians are women. 60% of college graduates are women. Women get 2/3 of the top grades in colleges. 47% of engineering graduates are women. Women are hungry. Women want to work. Women want economic freedom. Now, you come to the workplace and you say, I am not going to pick from the 60% of the women who are college graduates or who are toppers, who get the best grades. You are sub-optimizing the company. Okay, so if you really are a talent-driven company, you've almost got to put your blinders on and look at a talent, look at a person, not for their color or gender or ethnicity, look for what do they have to offer the company. Now, it's easier said than done, but you have to do that, because if you don't do that, you let your biases and the organization's biases override a pragmatic decision to hire the best talent.
There is no reason why women should not be rising to the top, becoming founders, and being more and more successful in their careers, whether as entrepreneurs or as managers and leaders in their companies. So let's get into it. We've got 30 minutes.
Hire the best and brightest, irregardless of ethnicity or background or gender. But then it's the tone at the top that decides whether this company has unconscious biases or not. So I'll give you an example. When you're in a meeting, I'll pick a woman in this case, presenting. And all of a sudden, people are talking over her. All right? Or I'm looking around the room and I watch a couple of guys rolling their eyes. You go, okay, so I can talk to those people after the meeting, or I can stop the meeting right now and say, will you let her finish? You see, I have the power. Whether I'm president or CFO or CEO, I had the power to stop the meeting and say, let her finish. Or whoever's rolling the eyes say, do you have a problem with your eyes? Okay? So now, don't do it. I am not suggesting you do it in a bad way. I am not suggesting you do it in a bad way. Please don't get me wrong. I'm the last person to offend.
No, yes.
But you know, you say it in a cherishing way. Is there a problem with your eyes? And I say this to you guys because very often, if you don't do it at the point at which it happens, people assume that you've sanctioned that behavior.
Right.
Okay? And they don't know that you've talked to the team behind. But you do it in a sensible, sensitive, situation-appropriate way. People will get the message. And if you model that behavior constantly, it very quickly goes down the organization that this is a company that is not going to tolerate this sort of behavior. I'm not saying PepsiCo is perfect, by no means. But even when we looked at the code of conduct issues, which I would look at every quarter when I was CFO, president, CEO, I'd look specifically at anything to do with harassment, sexual harassment, bad treatment of people of different kinds, and make sure those issues were resolved very, very quickly. Because if we let those issues linger for a long time, it means the company doesn't care about those issues.
Right.
All right? And so, to me, that was very, very important that
As I've been doing some research on Indra, I have found her so inspiring with her assertive yet not overbearing sense of leadership. Watching Indra has helped me see that leadership doesn't have to be loud and overly bold, but you do have to stand your ground and be assertive when it comes to doing business in this male-dominated environment. A few things stood out to me as I was looking at Indra's journey and trying to figure out how I can implement the way that she has carried herself over the years all the way to being CEO of PepsiCo. Some of the things that stood out was her talking about how you need to view yourself as an equal in the workplace. As such, one of the most impressive things about Indra over the years was her pursuit for excellence. In her talks, she speaks again and again about how it is important to be a cut above the rest. Ask yourself, what is the value proposition that you are bringing into the spaces that you're getting into? Because no one is going to give you much attention or see you as exceptional if you do not have a valid and value proposition as an employee, as a leader, in any space you're in, really. Your value needs to be clear, and that comes with hard work.
For you to buckle under pressure, okay? Especially for women, unfortunately, the expectation is that you won't be confident and you won't be able to withstand tremendous pressure. So when you have to go through all the pressure, act as if you're confident, you're absolutely in control. And if you really do need to scream or have a good cry, which I did now and then, I locked my room and I said to my secretary, don't let anybody in here for 15 minutes.
Did you cry?
Yeah, sure.
You cried. Okay, I want to know that. Okay.
Out of frustration.
Frustration, yeah.
And then put the makeup back on. Back again.
So at the surface, it seems like, okay, you're just working hard and getting to where you want to get to. She spoke of how she sleeps only 4 hours and has given up everything else outside of family and work. So when it comes to the journey of success, not that you have to sacrifice exactly what she has sacrificed, but what are you willing to give to reach the top? That is a big question. And that's a question that you need to answer for yourself. Because nothing worthwhile will come without sacrifice. Indra doesn't drink. She's a vegetarian. And I think overall, her life displays a great sense of restraint, a great sense of, picking what is worth her time versus what is not. And I always say this on this podcast, your time is worth way more than anything else. Time is so important. So be very careful about how you give out your time and to whom you give out your time. And what value proposition they're bringing into your life. That's important. Being a lifelong student is something that is always so important, yet again, in every aspect of life. If you're a person who's not willing to learn from others, you cannot grow. Another aspect of Indra's leadership is hearing each voice around the table, whether big or small. That is something that a lot of good leaders implement into their day-to-day interactions with their company, with their employees. Being able to listen to someone else and not take it as a insult or get on the defensive is something that will help you grow tremendously. Always be willing to learn something new. Eagerly learn something new. And this is something that I have found very, very useful, especially when it comes to those reviews that you often have with your superiors. Go to the review with a learning spirit, not getting on the defensive or trying to, take it as if it's a personal attack on your character, being able to receive criticism or general knowledge or praise without taking it on too much of a personal level serves you to act with clarity and to act with precision rather than acting off of emotion. Because even if it's praise, if you take it too deeply into you, then your ego grows, and now you are making decisions out of, okay, so they think I'm doing great, or like, out of ego, out of emotion, and that can never be good either.
Now that you're armed with leadership skills and you understand your business cold, it's time to learn about how to set a strategic direction for a business. Real strategic thinking is about connecting dots to create shapes you never knew could exist. And forging a path through these multiple shapes that are being brought together and creating a path that nobody's created, because, the world will change. The challenge is to constantly study it and see what you need to retool today for the future. Sometimes people just look at the company and say, where is it going the next 10 years? And they say that's strategic thinking, without even thinking about the environment. How is it changing? How is the competition changing? How are consumer needs changing? So don't just project the company out. Start with, what's the world going to look like over the next 5 or 10 years? And then work backwards. So this is like a future back perspective of the company. And that allows you to think about, where should the company go to remain successful over the next decade?
Something else that I resonate with when it comes to Indra and how she leads her people is having a long-term view of things. She speaks of how you should be future thinking when you're making decisions as a leader, and not thinking out of the right now or even thinking from inside the organization. Take yourself out, see the broader perspective, see the future perspective, and then bring it back in and make decisions that can get you to being in an optimum space when it comes to the future. The time that Indra was a leader for PepsiCo, so much changed. The internet came into existence, e-commerce came into existence, and how she managed to still be an effective leader throughout all of that was having that zoom out and then zoom back in, that futuristic kind of thinking. And even as you manage your own life, your own personal life, I think that is such an important thing to take into consideration. Of course, don't get lost in tomorrow or into the future, that you forget to come back in and look at the steps that you need to make today and enjoy those steps, because you can't live for a dream that is promised. You cannot live for that. You need to live right now, but what you're doing, remember that that time will come, whether you're prepared for it or not. So there is a balance there, but just remember to see things from different perspectives. Be active in your life. Be an active participant of living your life. Though I won't be getting into each and every one of the 7 C's today, I definitely wanted to highlight the ones that resonate with me greatly and ones that I feel like I can grow and learn more and, just do better at.
The first C is competence. When somebody comes into a job and you say, hey, I'm going to be valuable because I have an MBA from this school, or I have an undergraduate degree from some prestigious school, that only works for the first 3 or 4 months. Pretty soon, everybody in the company is saying, what is this person good at? What is the core competence of this person? What is the value add of this person as opposed to the degree they had, which was yesterday's news? And one of the best ways to demonstrate this is by developing a hip pocket skill, by which I mean a skill you become so competent at, you're seen across the organization as having a proposition that would benefit the company. So how do you develop this and make it relevant? You've got to understand, what are the levers that make a difference in this company?
And once you understand that, you can ask yourself, do I have a hip pocket skill that plays to that value creating lever? So if you know revenue management and it doesn't apply to the industry you're in, it's not particularly useful. So you've got to make sure that hip pocket skill is relevant to that industry. Otherwise, develop one really fast. So people should look at you and say, I know what so-and-so's proposition is. I know what they're really, really good at, and the company needs it.
And this is a question of what value proposition are you bringing to the table? What do people know that if they need something solved, they come to you for? This is not something that you can just develop just like that tomorrow. But ask yourself, what is the vision of the company you're working at? What is the vision of the team? Relative to where you're at, of course, at that point in your career. What is the vision and how can you contribute to that? How can you be relevant to the overall plan? That is something that is so important to think of as you are navigating your professional life, and even your personal life. What is it that you are bringing to the table? What is it? Yeah, a lot of us don't like to hear that, but you actually, if you are going to remain in people's lives, people with a purpose, people with a plan, you do need to somehow have a plan of your own to add value.
Skill number 2 is creativity. It's not enough to be competent if you don't know how to connect different dots and create shapes that people have not seen. So creativity is part of that whole skill of connecting seemingly unconnected dots. Now, it's interesting, they don't teach this in business school, but it's something you can fine-tune over time, and it requires insatiable curiosity to want to study the process of creativity. And that combination, creativity led by curiosity, is the foundation of strategic thinking. So you can really use the skill today, no matter what stage of your career.
Creativity is so key in problem solving because the world is always changing. The people around us are always changing. And so ask yourself how you can creatively solve problems quickly. Because if you're always trying to implement the same thing over and over again, it's just not going to work. But creativity allows you to be dynamic and to be able to make decisions on your feet and solve problems effectively and efficiently. So ask yourself how you can implement more creativity into, even your day-to-day life, and how you make a certain type of meal, for example, just to push yourself outside of the coloring lines a little bit, or even a lot. It just depends on how comfortable you are and how that helps you solve the problem at hand.
When you talk about ships, they always talk about a true north, and that's really where north is. Your personal compass has to point true north, because integrity is a 0 or 100 thing. The next skill is what I call your compass, and that encompasses integrity. For me, integrity is an absolute. It's either present or it's not. Are you living up to the moral code of the company and society you're a part of? Integrity is clear-cut. I can't say that somebody's got 80% integrity. That doesn't work. You either know integrity or you have integrity. And when you say you have integrity, your compass is pointing to true north. Here's the scary part. If you have great integrity on most things you do, but in certain areas you don't have integrity. For example, you always make sure that the books of the company are in order. You make sure that people are paid properly. You make sure that your suppliers are paid on time, etc., etc. But let's say you take bribes. What happens is people stop respecting you because you think you're doing it in private, but really not. Everybody knows it's happening. The people who gave you the bribe know that you're taking a bribe. So all of a sudden you're a lesser person in people's minds because you really don't have integrity because you're actually padding your pocket. Let me take another example. Let's say that you're the most upstanding leader. You do everything right, but you pay your women less than you pay the men for the same job. That's lack of integrity, because on what basis are you making that decision? It's just a violation of a moral code, because you're basically saying a woman is a lesser person than a man. Nobody follows somebody with no integrity.
That is so, so important. Ask yourself, where is your true north? I've gone through so much, and I cannot say I've always been the perfect person. I truly have not. But I think what really drew me back to moving with more purpose was just sitting down and figuring out what is my true north. How do I move with more integrity, even if there were times that I was not? Because you can't allow yourself to just stick in the past. There's a time to move forward, and there's a time to forgive yourself. But really, really be honest with yourself and ask yourself what your true north is. Some practical advice I can give you, ladies, so you can grow in your professional journey is try to find spaces that help you talk better. My personal favorite, and one that I'll be getting into more and more, is Toastmasters International. They help you, engage productively in debates, be able to carry yourself, and build your brand in a way that gives you more value. So things like that. Speaking well is very important. Having a strategy of your future is important. And continuing to grow your skills. There are so many online resources that can help you grow in your area of expertise. So ask yourself, in which ways can you truly invest in yourself? Invest that time back into yourself. Absolutely important. When you're working at your job and you are assigned a task, be hungry for minimum input from your boss. When you're given a task, try to bring it as close to finish and as close to perfection as you possibly can in order to breed a sense of reliability within your team. They can rely on you to come back without so many iterations. I know that is, something that you can grow more and more, attuned to. So don't be too hard on yourself as you're starting out and you have questions. Questions are encouraged, but then there has to be a sense of growth as you progress and the more time you spend at work, basically. So try to push yourself, because as you're going to work, I know a lot of people don't like to, people don't like to say, I just go to work and I do my thing at work and I excel at work, because this hustle culture has just gotten into a lot of us. But you're spending time at that job. So as you're spending time at work, make it worth your while. Make it so you are learning something, so you are contributing something, because that is your time that you're giving away. But you can take it back by making sure that even as you are working there, you are breeding excellence within yourself to be an asset to any team that you're added to. So don't worry too much about everybody starting a business or this, that, and the other. Of course, if you can and if you want to, you should. But that time you spend at work too, make it worth it. Don't waste your own time. Don't waste your own time. I know as women, there are a lot of responsibilities on us, especially when you start a family. So one thing that I have loved about, seeing Indra and reading more about her journey is she says you really cannot balance it all when you are a woman. What you need to do is to be strategic about where your time is going, and some things you might have to forego. You can really not have it all, but you can try to balance it all. You can try to allocate responsibilities accordingly in order to be as well-rounded as you can. But it is difficult for women. But let's not limit ourselves to that. Let us, lean on the structures we have in order to continue growing and to continue being leaders in these spaces and more. With that, guys, I say au revoir. Thank you so much for joining me. I will link some of the resources that I have found down below, including a masterclass to Indra's class, which has been so inspirational for me. Being women of color and coming from places where we never thought where we would be is where we are. It's important to sit back, take it in, and realize that you still got work to do, honey. You still can push the bar even more. So push yourselves. We need more women in the C-suite. We need more women in leadership positions, decision-making positions, because we are a cut above the rest. We are excellence. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time on C-Suite Lounge.